I
And that's
think
all I'm
this
doing.
one
It's
was
gonna
held because
vibrate
Jane
now.
was in school.
Oh, it is?
for
Uh-huh.
school and
Okay, I have no
special meetings
speaker on
for
it.
all
Then how
last
do I
week.
get it off?
Okay, right there, it's gonna vibrate, but not ring.
Yeah.
Now, all you have to do is
I was
press the
just
top
wondering
side of
about
this,
that because
and
Okay.
then it'll turn up the volume and
I know.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
February
See how
Okay.
it says
2014,
Yeah.
that, you go
we went
down
from
one,
two meetings
Uh-huh.
and
to one
I felt it
meeting.
vibrate, see the squiggly, oops,
Yeah.
squiggly lines?
I think this is the
There's no
third,
squiggly lines now, but if you go
special
up one,
They're,
there's squiggly lines, but no speaker.
Okay, so it's on
James
vibrate.
was
Yeah.
down
And all I
in
have to do is hit the
meeting for
top.
all the
Yep.
planners.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think they just do what they have to do.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Hadn't got her on the phone yet?
No, not answering. This is the number she gave.
Maybe she just said to heck with it.
Yeah.
So this is the parcel in question.
That's correct, right there. There's a right of way through this parcel that goes right up like that into this right here. And there's a house on this parcel and it's right there.
I was looking at this the other area and I said, okay, that's north. And then when I looked at this, I was thinking, what's wrong with this? Then I realized, oh,
Now turn
that's
aside.
That's where they use.
Yeah.
Yep.
Doesn't look like a big house at the time.
That was from the on the phone.
It's 950 square
But
feet.
she's not answering. Anything on?
Well, it's got a
Let me
1,292
try
square foot house.
Okay.
Where?
Right here in the corner. Tells you the size.
Yeah, I don't know why we would.
Oh. See, I'm looking at this one right here.
She's smart.
Yeah, house footprint. So the livable's 952, but the
Guess
house
my mic's on.
footprint counting the porches is 1292.
Hi, Annie. This is Amy Lanza at the clerk. Hey, I tried calling your number on the speakerphone. It just rang and rang. So shall we try it again? Okay, yeah, so anyway, and we'll just, once we fix it, we'll leave you on there, and then you can do your thing, and mute it when you need to. Okay, we'll try it, and see if we can get you. Okay.
We're not going to be live broadcasting and having technical difficulties.
Uh-oh.
Can we just go home?
It's still recording on the DVD player, but I'm not sure about the audio, so make sure you have your little thing going.
I want to be on record that we will allow the press in here and they don't have to go through security or any kind of background check.
Works for me.
Yeah,
So-
that's
Now the guy down in front.
Yeah, it only took a week to figure out he better back away from it.
Because you answer right away. Maybe
Much
just.
as we all like to do things like that, it's just not the right
Yeah.
way.
No, it's,
Yeah.
and there was one time I was working in Texas, and I had to go to a conference on feeds. I didn't like driving, so I took the limo from the house down to Dallas Fort Worth. Didn't think anything of it. Went to the conference, came back, took a limo back. They ordered my report. The director told me, he said, just because you're there doesn't mean was it Dallas,
Yeah.
Fort Worth, it's 110 miles an hour, yeah. What's it, 25 cents miles?
3973.
This is 2751. Yeah. Is it $55 round trip? Goes down. Is it parking $3 for
You did it in the right.
6 days? Is it another 20? So $75, right? Yeah. The limit was $18 one way, and I gave the guy a $2 tip, and I did not claim the tip. I said, but if you want to reconstruct it, go ahead, you owe me $40. And he just kind of, he says, I said, yeah, I said, the guy that audited that should have come and asked me what he thought I went through it on your desk. Because what happened is the chief of finance didn't like the chief of engineering, so anything that happened with engineering.
Stick it to them every time they can.
Yeah, yeah.
Sounds like working for the city of Prescott. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, what was this now? Hi, fellas.
Yeah.
Greetings.
Greetings, hello there.
Okay, how are you?
It's beautiful outside. We gotta come to work, hi.
Yeah. Want to spend more time out there, don't you?
All right. I never thought retirement would be fun. I was gonna work until April of this year, really, because I like what I did in Prescott. But it all worked out to the good. It really did.
And then,
I'm a happy camper. I met one of the developers down there. I was picking up some trees. And here he is, and I was saying, are you retired? He's looking great. And he said, yeah. I said, isn't this fun? I said, yeah. He sold his business. He was a real estate agent in town. Development
okay, I'm
company
gonna
too.
put the, so we'll call.
Well, I don't spend enough time outside,
Oh, my God.
but I'm either in the car or somewhere else, and, you know, I keep busy,
That's good.
yeah, but I don't know anything about the ground, so I don't spend time gardening or
Oh.
that sort of thing.
Well, I think we need to call this meeting to order.
Here we go.
Okay, call to order the April 13th, 2016 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Florence, would you lead us in the pledge?
I certainly will.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Florence Sloan,
Here.
Michael Bacon,
Here?
Julie Van Wolfen,
Here.
Claude Baker. Claude Baker's absent. Gary Pasiak,
Here.
Charles Merritt,
Here.
Annie Lane. Here. Annie Lane's appearing by phone. Okay.
All right, item 4, consideration to accept the March 1st, 2016 regular meeting minutes. Anybody have any comments or questions?
It's okay by me.
I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes of the previous meeting, which I believe was March 3rd,
March 1st.
March 1st, as written.
I have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Staff reports?
Well, no staff reports this evening.
Thank you, James. Okay, item 6, moving forward in the public hearing section. Item 6A, consideration of possible action to hold a citizen review meeting regarding ordinance 16-816 to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 4, General Regulations, Section 4.31, Medical Marijuana Dispensaries, Cultivation, and Infusion Facilities to require a 500-foot separation from the edge of right-of-way of State Route 89.
Good evening, Commission and Chair. Thank you very much. We have before you tonight a citizen review of some proposed amendments to the Unified Development Ordinance that staff was putting forward upon council recommendation. The proposed amendments affect Chapter 4.31 of the UDO regarding medical marijuana dispensaries, cultivation facilities, and infusion facilities. Specifically affected is Section 4.31.d, the separation requirements from all medical marijuana facilities, which includes dispensaries, cultivation facilities, and infusion facilities. We will be adding a number 500 feet from the edge of right-of-way of State Route 89. That would basically create a buffer along State Route 89 to the east and to the west of 500 feet, where new cultivation facilities, dispensaries, and infusion facilities could not be placed. This kind of comes as a cautionary amendment to the ordinance based on some forthcoming changes in state law. And as a way of background, one dispensary per 10 registered pharmacies in the state was allowed at the beginning of the medical marijuana industry here in the state. And the state had to figure out how to distribute those dispensaries. As you know, we only have one here in Chino Valley. And that's because they created something called Community Health Assessment Areas. We call them CHAWs. After the first dispensary license was issued, there was a 3-year window to stay within those delegated CHAWs. And that was part of the rules put forth by the Arizona Department of Health. So that 3 years is expiring, and dispensaries can now move around the state as they wish. This shows the CHAWs around the state. These are actually based on a community health analysis area that was created as part of a different law. The state found it convenient to use these same analysis areas for medical marijuana. I realize this is small to look at, but the Chino Valley is this pink area that I'm hovering over with my mouse. So this covers Chino Valley, Ash Fork, Paulden, Seligman, and kind of all of the areas out to the east, which are mostly Forest Service. So we have currently one dispensary in that area, and it's right on State Route 89. Metro Phoenix, which is highlighted here in this smaller box, has a lot of dispensaries. I'm not sure how many they have off the top of my head, but Metro Phoenix has a high population density, therefore they have a lot more pharmacies. They have one dispensary per 10 pharmacies, and they've allowed about 500 in the state. Those can now move around the state freely as they wish. They're no longer restricted to these community health analysis areas. So in anticipation of that change, we're thinking about amending the UDO to protect Chino Valley from further development of dispensaries along the highway, and also the development of more infusion or cultivation facilities. So this is being done in anticipation of those moves throughout the state. We honestly don't anticipate an influx of dispensaries. We expect the dispensaries to go where the money is, which is the metro areas, specifically Phoenix and Tucson, possibly Flagstaff, possibly Prescott. They don't have as high a population density as the Valley, obviously, but we are doing this to protect the town from the possibility of future dispensaries coming. The possibility of the current dispensary moving and being replaced with a new one in town is something that we are thinking about. If the current dispensary does move and we are left without a dispensary, that would bring us back to a situation where Chino Valley residents could grow their own medical marijuana in their home if they're a licensed cardholder or a licensed caregiver to cardholders. This becomes an enforcement issue for the police. So that's something we're thinking about as we go along. But what we also are anticipating is keeping these off of the highway frontage. As you're driving through Chino Valley, you're driving through the highway. That's where a vast majority of our traffic is, and we'd like to keep these uses off of that highway frontage. We basically want to do this to limit the visibility of these uses along the highway, and as we know, we have limited them to industrial areas in town. This was an amendment that went through planning and zoning from December on. So we have put these uses in industrial zonings, which are more than 500 feet away from Highway 89 currently. But if we rezoned a property for industrial, that industrial use went away, that would then open it up to a dispensary moving there. And if that industrial property was close to the highway, we could end up with another dispensary on the highway. If there are any questions, I'd entertain questions, but this is actually a citizen hearing. We won't be making any decisions on this evening. It will be placed on the next P&Z agenda for a public hearing.
Anybody have any questions for James?
Well, this is kind of out of the blue, James. What if the existing dispensary decided, well, there's not enough business here in Chino Valley, so we're going to move the flags down. So they close shop here at somewhat of their expense, because I understand these dispensaries have to have a lot of security, safety, and so forth. They close shop and say 8 months down the road, another dispensary wants to open up here. Would they be able to go into that same facility?
Our legal non-conforming uses are actually required to come back in within 6 months. So 8 months, no. 6 months, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The, excuse me, the facility that's being built off 4 South, is that outside this 500?
That is outside of this 500-foot buffer. That's about 700 feet off the highway. Just
Okay.
off the top of my head, it may be somewhere
I thought it was
closer to
close.
600.
I thought it was close.
It
to
is,
that.
and even if we pass this and they were 400 feet away, for example, they have pulled their building permits, they've begun construction, so we
Okay.
would not be creating anything that would stop that.
I didn't think so, but, okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah, that same property on Road 4 South, is all of that building going to be the farm?
Yes, those are legally required by state law to be within an enclosed lock structure. That can be a greenhouse with a lock on it, but a lot of these operations are choosing to build buildings because it's easier to control the climate within them.
Well, aren't they, if they're limited to, what was it, 33,000 square feet?
That isn't a
That's
limit
not
that's
so?
in place. No,
They're not limited at all?
no.
Well, isn't that where the grocery store is going?
There is talk of putting a
Yeah,
grocery
okay.
store there that
Mhm.
has not been permitted or come
No.
through any of our processes. So
I was hoping that was the grocery store.
we all are. Any further questions?
I have one question.
Mhm.
Where is the existing dispensary?
The existing dispensary is just south of Aroma Pizza. Is that correct? Or
Right
just
next
north?
door to
Yeah,
Aroma
it's right
Pizza,
next
actually.
to. It's in the same building as Aroma Pizza.
Yep.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't notice it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is within the 500
gotta
feet
pull your
we're
mic
talking.
over.
That's within the 500 feet we're talking
Yes,
about.
it sure is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if that one was closed for 6 months and a day, they'd have to find
They're,
someplace
they're out of
else.
luck. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just need the clarification.
Yeah. All right. With that, we can move on from this item.
James, do we need to make a motion to move this forward?
Yes, a motion to put it on the P&Z hearing for the 3rd of May, please.
Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion for that.
Mr. Chairman, I so move that we put this on the agenda for May 3rd at the Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you very much.
Do you have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carried. Moving forward to item 6B, consideration and possible action to hold a public hearing and to recommend to the town council adoption of ordinance 16-817 to rezone approximately 2 acres of real property located at 1650 Granite Creek Lane, Chino Valley, Arizona, consisting of a portion of the northeast quarter of Section 11, Township 16N, Range 02W, Gila and Salt River Base and Meridian, parcel number 306171110C, from I industrial to SR1 single family residential 1 acre minimum. James, you have some information for us?
Yes, thank you, Chairman and members of the commission. Can you hear me? I can't hear myself. Yes, okay, thank you. All right, we have before us zoning case 16-002, rezoning 1650 West Granite Creek. We have before you the vicinity map of the area. The subject property is highlighted in red and is this parcel right here. I wanted to give you a little bit of a reference. The auto junkyard is to the north of that by about 350 feet. This is the current zoning map of the area. As you can see, it's currently zoned industrial. The auto junkyard is again there for reference. Next to it, to the west, is single-family residential zoning, and that single-family residential is a subdivision, 1 acre subdivision, and then this zoning right here is a lower density residential zoning, still single family. The proposal we have before us is to change the zone of the parcel from industrial to single family residential 1 acre minimum. The existing use, which is a single family home, is not permitted in industrial zoning, and therefore the applicant has applied to bring that property into compliance. I wanted to give you an example of some of the things that are allowed under the current zoning and compare those with what would be allowed under the proposed zoning. Currently, auto salvage yards are allowed under this zoning, which is what we see to the north. Feedlots, quarries, mines, commercial outdoor kennels, and medical marijuana uses are all allowed in this zoning district. Under the proposed zoning, single-family residences and accessory uses are allowed. We consider that garages, barns, guest homes, things of that nature. This is the proposed site plan, which is actually showing no changes. This just gives you a reference of where the home is on the property. To the east here, we have the driveway. The driveway is an easement through the property to the south. The driveway comes into a garage and the single-family home near the center of the property. The current conditions on site are a manufactured home and garage permitted in 1984. That was permitted 9 years after the rezone to industrial. At the time, single-family residences were allowed in industrial zones. That is no longer the case. There's also a well house on site. So public outreach for this was done in accordance with state statute and the UDO. Both the current applicant and the tenant held a neighborhood meeting on site in February on the 22nd. That should be February 22nd, 2016. I'm sorry about that. A representative for the adjacent neighbor was in attendance, and he expressed opposition. That representative was the realtor who is representing the neighbors next door in a sale of that property. The opposition is due to the perception that that would diminish the property rights of the industrial zone property next door. And I have an included opposition map here. The property owners who are opposed own this parcel. It's a partnership. The partnership includes, I believe, 3 members, and one of the members wrote in opposition. You have that opposition letter in your packet. The effect zone change, or the effect of the proposed zone change on those surrounding parcels is minimal. The industrial and residential buffer would be required. That would require landscaping. UDO 4.8 A1 requires a 10-foot landscape buffer on the residential side of a fence. The fence would be required if there was outdoor storage on those industrial properties, and a 10-foot buffer would be required to be on the residential side of that fence. That would basically have landscaping that is low water use. It includes evergreens, shrubbery, that kind of thing that just kind of breaks up the mass of a fence. UDO section 4.26 is the requirements for landscaping, and that would require a 5-foot wide landscape strip along street frontage where that industrial property is adjacent to residential zoning. So the street frontage is to the south. Granite Creek Lane runs right here. There would be a 5-foot buffer required here, and a 10-foot buffer, or a landscaping buffer required here. That is only in the event that the industrial property is developed with outdoor storage, which would require a fence. This is in general conformance with the general plan. The general plan isn't really fine-grained enough to show us individual parcels. So in the general plan potential land use map, we actually have a commercial / floodplain potential land use that's highlighted here in red with hatching across it. This is right on the edge of that and the low-density residential area. So it's difficult to tell whether this was intended to be in the red or the beige because our map isn't that fine-grained. But given general planning standards, an industrial zone next to a residential subdivision is typically not something that a planner would go forward with. This day and age, back when it was passed, that was more common. So I did need to talk about how it's not inside of a community core either. These community cores are where we would focus development in the future and have sort of a focused vision for that development. We are outside of that community core by quite a bit. If there are any questions for me, I'm available for those questions. The applicant is also available for questions.
Okay, anybody have questions for James while he's at the microphone?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a comment. I noticed the applicant is proposing this because they cannot get a loan for their property. We had a similar instance in the city of Prescott. It was a light industrial. It was about 1 block east of the present Albertsons Plaza, where Albertsons isn't anymore. And it was really a hard piece of property to develop as industrial or even commercial because of the very limited parking space. So we had an applicant there who wanted to use the existing home, which was a home, and they couldn't get a loan because of the zoning. So the City of Prescott Council did approve the reversion to a residential zoning district to allow them to use that as a home so they can get their loan. I just wanted to offer that because I think this would be a similar instance where somebody who has a home wants to make improvements to it or buy it, and they cannot because they cannot get a loan. So I think this is a similar case.
Thank you for that comment.
James, a question for you. at the time this was rezoned to industrial, it was not a difficulty to obtain a home loan in an area like that, and today that has changed. Am I correct there?
That's quite correct. After the housing market bubble and the following recession, lenders have become extremely restrictive. If a loan underwriter calls our office and says, "Can this building be rebuilt as is if it was destroyed?" Our zoning ordinance currently does not allow that. I tell them no, and they go back to the lender and say, "We won't underwrite this." So that's typically how these come before us, and because the economy crashed and because the housing market was a huge part of that, lending restrictions have gotten very strict.
Also, the zoning has changed. Some of the requirements in the zoning has changed to where you cannot do any sort of a residential facility on an industrial property.
That's
now.
correct. Yeah, that's correct. When this was done, our adopted zoning ordinance did not have a non-conforming use clause that was as strict. We did have a non-conforming use clause, but it was nowhere near as strict. In most cases, if a use is discontinued for 6 months, that is no longer an allowed use. And, for example, if the home was destroyed by an act of God, these are the kind of things that insurers are now looking at. It would have to be rebuilt under industrial standards.
So it appears to me from all this discussion that through circumstances that they did not have control over, they've been placed in a position of not being able to use their property.
That's correct.
Okay. Anybody have any more questions for James?
I just have one comment.
Pull your mic up to you, Gary.
Okay. Yeah, we had a similar situation about 6 months ago on road, I believe it was 4 North,
That's correct.
where there was an industrial and it was a residential house, and I think we had a special meeting on that one also as to changing the zoning request, so I'm just
That's
making
correct.
that comment.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you.
Could you, excuse me, could you go back to the map that's the different colors and shows the
I'd be
the
happy
different
to.
zoning
Yes.
in colors?
Let me make sure. Okay, here's our current zoning map.
Okay. Now, there's residential all around this property already, correct?
Correct, except to the south.
Immediate south, there are 2 parcels, it looks like,
Yes, that's correct.
That are
and
industrial.
And over to the east.
and the complainant is the property on the east, is that right?
That's correct.
And then beyond his property is also industrial.
Yes, that's more industrial. And this blue hatching here is a floodplain.
Okay.
Yeah, the blue hatching is a floodplain. The light blue is a floodway. The reason I showed those is because they are shown on our community plan, our general plan, and they're shown as the red with the hatching across it, and I wanted to give you that as a point of reference.
Okay, now does that floodway, does that put that proposed residential property in jeopardy of needing flood insurance, or is it, do we know?
It doesn't put it in need of flood insurance. The only the properties that are directly affected by this light blue or the blue hatching.
Okay,
So the corner of the property directly to the east, this triangular property is almost entirely impacted by a floodway. And some of these properties in here, a lot of those would actually require a what we call a LOMAR, letter of map revision, from FEMA, which is a cumbersome process.
sure. Now, how many acres is that property of the complainant?
I
How large
believe
is it?
that's approximately 3.5 acres. We actually have a representative of the opposition. He may know more. Oh, okay. And we also have the owner here. So during the public hearing, we can ask them for more information.
I'm just trying to get a feel for what couldn't happen with that property if we change this to residential. That's all the questions I have.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you, James.
Thank you.
I'd like to give the applicant a chance to speak, if you don't mind. When you step up to the podium, state your name and where you live.
My name is Tim Henriksen. I live at where I live.
Yes.
I live at 3850 Granite Lynx Creek Estates, Lynx Creek Road off of Highway 69.
Okay.
I've owned this property for off and on for several years. I traded it off and then I got it back. The gentleman that's in it has been working for me for 20 years. He expressed interest in it 3 or 4 years ago, and him and his wife have just done just immaculate stuff to it. I lost interest a long time ago, and it's just kind of he's just done a lot with it. And I thought, well, you know, I'd just sell it to him. And we thought it would be a non-issue. We went through the mortgage process, and I mean, it's just at the 11th hour, it came to be that you know, the appraiser, just like we said, called the city and said it can't be rebuilt as residential, and I mean. And it kind of stopped everything. And I do believe that property, you know, someday down the road will be industrial. I don't know that there's any need for it any time in my lifetime, and probably other. That house has been there since '84 for a long time, and it's been residential the whole time. I don't know of any businesses that have operated out of it. And it's a nice little farm, and it's got a old log cabin in it, 2 stories. It's got a detached garage and then a little well house. It's completely fenced, and I don't think the current owner of Mario and Ramirez and his wife, I don't think they have any intention of stopping anybody from doing what they want to do. They would just like to purchase their home and move on. And I don't think they're the type of people that are going to stop anybody else from doing anything else to theirs. You know, they knew it was industrial zone when they bought it, or they know now, you know, and they're still continuing wanting to buy it. I don't think that they're going to, you know, be out there with signs or banners or anything like that, you know, trying to stop this development or of the other parcels. I think those parcels have been sitting there for a couple decades or a few decades, and nothing's happened to them yet. And this piece is something that we'd like to use and do something productive with. They've been living there for a few years or a couple years, and I think they'd like to continue living there.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have questions? All righty. Thank you, sir.
All right.
I'd like to offer an opportunity to the opposition individual to step up and speak. Please state your name and address, please.
Jay Wilmore. I live at 9500 Rancho Vista in Prescott Valley. And I actually represent the 3 acres on the east and the 2 acres on the south. And so there's actually 5 acres there. The 5 acres and the 2 acres that belongs to Tim Hendrickson was all one parcel that belonged to a fellow by the name of J.B. Jordan. He changed it to industrial so he could get more money out of us, of course, and we were guaranteed it was all industrial property. We paid way more money for it when we bought it than it's worth today. I think there might be some impact to us if that was back zoned residential. I might have a solution for Tim if he wants to take 2 acres I own over by the tree farm and trade for it. I'll trade him for the log cabin. I'll finance the guy and I'll carry him on paper, and he doesn't have to go get a loan. But I object to that being zoned residential. I think it would impact us having commercial property around it.
So you own other property besides the property that's directly to the east?
I own the property on the north and the east of the old Doreens. I gave the city of Prescott an easement through my property to take Highway 4 north through my property, and I gave the city an acre of ground to take it through my property with no charge to the city.
But around this parcel, you only own the property to the east, am I correct?
And the 2 on the south.
On the north, yeah.
The 2 on the south, you still currently own both of those?
They're 2 individual acres. One of them is owned by my accountant, and the other one is owned by a financial advisor of mine. So
Okay. And you represent those folks.
I represent them.
All right, anybody have any questions?
I have something for James after, if no one has any questions for the applicant.
Thank you, sir, for your time.
Okay.
Gary, did you have a question?
I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah, I do have one. I have one question.
For the
Yeah, for
owner
the,
of
no, for the,
the
E-
opposing party?
either one, I guess. This parcel that's in, thank you. This parcel that's in question, was that ever owned by the person that is in opposition of the zoning change?
The two that I'm offering,
No, the one
No,
that's,
no.
the one that's up for the zoning change, did you ever
This-
own that property?
I never owned it.
Okay, I guess the question is that at one time it was all one large parcel, and then it got split into four. And so you never, the ownership of 306-17-110C was never yours, your accountant, or your financial advisor?
No.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I want to make clear. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, step up to the podium, please.
Just to clarify, I believe this property was zoned industrial back in the mid-'80s or early '80s. I don't believe JB ever changed the zoning on this. I do believe it was zoned, 30-plus years ago.
Yeah, our information says that. Thank you. Okay, does anybody have any comments?
Somebody back there.
Sir? Please state your name and address when you approach the microphone.
Good afternoon, I'm John Kazicki from 2810 North Navajo Place here in Chino Valley. I'm also a realtor with Realty Executives, and I have the honor and pleasure of representing Mr. Wilmore and his group on a number of properties. Having said that, as a realtor, I could see a negative impact to the other commercial properties around it by rezoning this residential. And having said that, I also represent properties on Tree Farm Lane and Jerome Junction that are commercial industrial, which I've been approached by residential buyers to buy. And I've had to reject them because there are not residential allowances made there. Also, along that same vein, I also represent Mr. Kurt Wells in a number of his properties. And I've gone to the town of Chino Valley and inquired about the opportunity to build residential properties on Mr. Wells's properties. And those have also been rejected and, denied. So in the manner of consistency, I think we need to be consistent with what's commercial and what is residential and what isn't and what isn't. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
Sir, may I ask you a question?
Certainly.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. What do you perceive as being the reason this would bring down the property values or negatively affect the property values next to it?
Well, what's the next one to go? What would be rezoned for another use? It may not just be this one in particular property, but what would be rezoned around it? Next, it could be a domino theory. And it does lessen it. It does lessen what the commercial property can do.
You have evidence of that?
I didn't bring anything with me,
But is there a study? Is there a published report? Is there?
I could furnish you with something if you'd like it at a future date.
At a future date, perhaps it would be wise to bring that.
We probably won't be able to revisit this to do that.
Okay.
I'm going to suggest that if you had something, it'd have been good for you to bring it tonight.
Okay.
Is it not, James, this is a kind of a question for you. Thank you, sir.
I do have a question for the gentleman, though.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Okay. You had made comment about representing a gentleman named Mr. Wells.
Correct.
Okay. And you had commented about wanting to build residential on commercial zoned, and you were told you couldn't do that.
That is correct.
And you never approached the town about requesting a rezoning from commercial to residential so that you could build?
Not formally, but I was in front of the town planner and some of her,
And they never made that comment to you, that you
That-
might be able to rezone?
the comment was that I couldn't, and that's not what the town wanted to see there.
Ah, okay. I just wanted to clarify as to
Yeah.
what happened as to asking about new residential. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah, it would be welcome on the opposite side of Perkinsville Road, but not welcome on the north side of Perkinsville Road.
Anybody else have any questions? Thank you, sir. James, could you step up to the mic?
Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, but at the time that the residence was built there, it was allowable to build residential structures on a industrial property. Am I
That's correct, yes.
So again, it seems to me that because of rule changes that none of us here, including the folks in the audience, had any say-so about, has caused the person that owns the property now to have the inability to do anything with it according to the new rules that are in effect now with the lending institutions and also with our zoning ordinances. Am I correct?
That's the position we're taking, yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for James as well,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman. The adjacent property owner has expressed his concern that his property rights would somehow be impacted by rezoning this to residential. Could you please explain to all of us if that is really the case?
The impacts that I mentioned earlier, the requirement of landscape buffer and fencing, would be the major impacts. The other impact I could see, thinking this through, would be that a small marijuana farm could probably be built here. I don't have a measurement tool in front of me. I believe this property is more than 500 feet deep, the property in question. So currently, a medical marijuana farm could probably be built here as a matter of right. If this was rezoned, they would have the possibility
James, to
of...
correct you,
Yes.
the parcel that we're looking at by the site plan, the largest dimension is 346 feet.
Oh, okay. Well,
So, no.
no. So that's actually not the case. So that given, this would not affect their right to grow marijuana there. I'm trying to think of any other uses that we specifically have a residential buffer from.
You mentioned for a junkyard, it would have to have a 10-foot setback, correct?
Correct.
That's only for a salvage yard.
That would be for any outdoor storage
Any
or
outdoor-
dead storage.
Okay,
yeah.
dead
So,
storage.
Yeah.
If I wanted to build an industrial building there, what would be the setback from the side property line?
The setback from the side property line is 50 feet.
Okay.
That's true whether or not this is a residential zoning.
Okay.
Yes.
And lots of times, isn't that 50 feet used for parking?
Generally, yes.
Yes. So, and what you're saying is that, according to Prop 211, we can't really rezone anything if it impacts, a property owner. And right now, the property owner has no impacts as to what type of use he can put on that property because we'd be taking away his property right. So basically, he could put any use on his industrial property, notwithstanding any future objections by the property we're rezoning today.
Yes, I believe that's correct, if I follow your logic. So let me restate it and see if
Sure.
I'm following you. Arizona Prop 207 that prevents us from taking land use action that would negatively affect a property owner. I believe what you're saying is would not come into play in this
Correct.
case because we are not restricting their land use rights.
Correct.
Correct. As I stated, there would be the impact of them having to put up a fence and a landscape buffer.
If there was outdoor storage.
Correct. Yes.
And in most commercial development criteria, there would be landscaping buffers and things of that nature anyways, am I correct?
That's correct. Yeah. As we come forward with new developments, they go through the tech review. There's always a landscape strip required at the front end of the property. In this case, it would be required at the back end of the property as well, because the adjacent zoning would be residential. In the case of a Prop 207 claim, we would also be able to give a protected development right to the adjacent property. That's something that we saw coming forward with the medical marijuana uses. Those went directly to town council. They didn't come before this board, but they would be able to submit a protected development rights plan. That would give them up to 5 years to come forward with development as proposed. It's a conceptual plan that would be put forth to the town council. The town council has the opportunity to make comment on it and either approve or disapprove of it. And they would be able to make claim with a protected development rights plan. So that is one way to think about Prop 207 impacts.
But in this particular instance, that really doesn't apply because there isn't anything that's being restricted from being done there.
That's correct. For example, if we rezone this and it was 500 feet deep, the medical marijuana farm could be proposed. Given that it's not 500 feet deep, that isn't an issue we need to worry about.
Anybody have any other questions or discussion? From my perspective, thank you, James, I
Thank you.
appreciate that. From my perspective, again, I'm going to restate what I've said before. It looks to me like this property has had a use on it for many years as a residential property, which was allowed at the time the buildings were permitted and built. And now through a series of zoning changes and economic issues, it's no longer able to be replaced if it was destroyed. And it seems to me that that is a use on the property that's being denied the property owner at this time, given the current zoning. And also, given the fact that the properties around it could possibly have some remotely perceived diminishment of value, which would be in the owner's eyes and not necessarily other folks' eyes. I don't see how this could be, I don't see how the current owner of the property should be held hostage by a situation that was not in his control or caused by his decisions. So, anybody else have any comments?
I'd have to agree with you, Mr. Chair. The residence has been there long, was properly put there at the beginning. I don't see that it imposes any detrimental issues to the people, properties around it. I move that we change the residential zoning to this to be, or to the zoning on this parcel to be residential.
I second that, if that you're putting forward that as a motion.
I am.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, folks, for speaking tonight. Moving forward to item 7, non-public action hearing items. Do we have any of those, James?
Let me look at that agenda. Amy, thank you. Okay, no, we do not have any non-public hearing action items.
Okay, so moving forward to discussion items. Item 8A, presentation of upcoming UDO amendments to section 4.21, sign regulations and methods for community and business outreach on this process.
Thank you once again, Chair and Commission. We have before you some updates on the sign ordinance amendments we're making. I wanted to talk about the process that we've gone through thus far. We talked a little bit about this last month, so I'm not going to go through each and every detail, but we've done some research on a Supreme Court case called Reed versus Gilbert. I've actually given you a short packet on the kind of legal ramifications of that for local jurisdictions. It's not really for discussion this evening, but I did want to give it to you for your edification and for you to keep in mind as we go forward in this process. We also put out a survey instrument on the web and have collected to date 18 responses. I'll go through that a little bit at the end of this presentation. That was put out on the town website. I encourage you to go ahead and take a look at it if you'd like to, chinoaz.net, and that's under the Development Services page. If you are so inclined, you can take it. It's only 10 questions. We've done a comparative analysis of our UDO, the Prescott Land Development Code, Prescott Valley Zoning Code, and Yavapai County Zoning Ordinance. We've also looked at some from the Valley, and I've given those out to members of our sign committee. We've done in-office outreach as well. As I stated at the last meeting, we had an allowance for temporary sign permits for up to a year. That ordinance expired at the beginning of the year, so as people come in to renew them, I've done outreach through that process. I wanted to speak a little bit more about what I've done this far. I sent out a mass email to business license holders who operate within the town. That includes businesses who just do business in the town and aren't located in the town. So that's approximately 840 businesses. From that, I started getting those survey responses. And that survey instrument, again, was emailed through that mass emailing and is posted on our website. And we had a committee formed to look at this sign code update. That includes local business owners and one general concerned citizen who wants to be involved in the process. So that's been a really good outcome. And as you know, I've been doing these updates monthly at P&Z. We have further upcoming steps. We're about halfway through the process. We'll continue to discuss these, and I will actually have before you on the 3rd of May a draft of the ordinance, and that will be a citizen review, again, just like we did with the medical marijuana thing this evening. I want to finalize those survey results. I have a chamber luncheon coming up on May 11th, so I'd like to finalize those results just prior to that luncheon so that I can give those results at the luncheon. We are holding sign code committee meetings once per month. We try to have those just before these P&Z meetings so that I can have a fresh report to give you. Again, we have ongoing communication. I have, I think, started to annoy the sign code committee already with all the emails I've sent them. And final steps, we'll have a public hearing at P&Z and one at Town Council. Here are the survey results we had when I made this. We had 16 responses. We now have 2 more. 12 of those responses were business owners. The yellow is yes, I own a business. The blue is no, I don't. I asked, is the business located along State Route 89? We had a large amount that was and few who weren't. The reason I asked that question is because we asked the question, would you pay a nominal fee to have a directional sign located on State Route 89 indicating your business? The reason we asked this question is because ADOT, who is in control of State Route 89 through the town, has the ability to put up blue signs with a logo of the business and a directional and Generally says 1 mile, 2 mile, quarter mile, for example. Some businesses were interested in this idea, but many more said no, or even maybe. We also asked how much they would be willing to pay for that sign. The folks who said yes were willing to pay between $50 and $200 annually. I apologize for how small this is. They considered most of those prices fair. Some of the folks who said no, they said we already pay taxes to the town. We don't think it's fair that we would have to pay more. I didn't couch this as would you pay that money to ADOT, a separate entity. So that's something I could clarify.
James, may I interrupt
Sure,
you? Since
absolutely.
you're right there,
Yeah.
I can ask you, are these the little blue signs you see like in the city of Prescott? And it says Burger King 2 miles down the road, left?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
We are doing outreach with ADOT to figure out how to get those in town. In Cottonwood, they actually have about 5 or 6 of those on one
Right.
signpost.
Mhm.
That's what we'd like to go for, so that it's a lot less cluttered. We
They
don't
also
want
show
those-
the logos of the business on there.
Yeah, which is really nice. I know some of the requirements for that is that your business is a certain distance off of the highway. Most of the businesses who have issues with our sign ordinance are actually off-highway businesses. They're looking for some sort of way to tell people, hey, we're here, and capture some of that drive-through traffic. Our drive-through traffic on a daily basis is actually about 27,000 people. It's more than double the size of the population of town. So they're looking for some way to capture that. Let's see. We actually asked, have you applied for a sign permit within the last 12 months? We wanted to see who was utilizing that temporary sign allowance. And only about 3 out of the 16 had said yes. Maybe 5. I can't read that small, I'm sorry. Finally, we are looking at some things such as sign size and asked if there would be support for an increased maximum size. This yellow bar shows the overwhelming response for yes. Our sign code actually is much more restrictive than many of the communities around us. Prescott allows for more than we do. Prescott Valley allows for more than we do. And Yavapai County, who adopted Maricopa County's very restrictive sign code at the time, still allows more than we do. So it gives you an idea of how restrictive we are with size. And finally, I asked, would you continue, or would you support the continued use of temporary banners for up to a year? You can see here again, that response is overwhelmingly yes. We wanted to see, is that being utilized? It didn't seem like it was because people weren't coming in for those permits, but they would support the use of them for other businesses. So this is something that we're going to be taking a close look at. Currently, our zoning code only allows for 1 grand opening banner, and it can only be up for 30 days. If you're holding a special event, you can have a banner for up to 10 days, once a year. So this doesn't give businesses much opportunity to advertise outside of their normal signage. We're going to be looking at how we can accommodate that without looking like Pit Row or whatever you want to call it. And we also asked if they would support A-frame signs. Again, overwhelmingly yes. The A-frame signs are typically only used by businesses on Highway 89, and we'll see that the percentage of those who support it matches pretty evenly the percentage of those who have a business along 89. Those are currently a $5 permit at the town, and we don't really track those very well, so through this process, we may come up with a way of tracking those to see how well they're used. I also had a slide in here. I don't think it made it in, but it was regarding the Sign Code Committee. The Sign Code Committee met on Monday of this week. We discussed essentially a lot of these issues that we went over in the survey, but we also discussed the format of our sign ordinance. Currently, it reads a little bit like a narrative. I don't even want to call it a user's manual. It's not that friendly. When people come in, they're often confused about how much signage they can have, what it would look like. We'd like to make it a little bit friendlier and put it in a table format and have a few more illustrations that would give people an idea of what they are and aren't allowed to do. Making these things user-friendly is a major challenge, and we may not succeed in that, but we'd like to make it friendlier than it is now. So we talked a lot about that format, and we decided to land on a table format with mini illustrations. This is a discussion item, so you can ask me questions as we go forward, and if you have any, I'm prepared for those, so please.
It seems, James, that you're working really diligently at this, and there's a lot of information. So any of this stuff you can bring to us in little bites like this is very helpful.
I'm happy to send those out via email if you're open to that as well. We can't have communication between more than half of the members. So if you reply to me, don't reply all, but I'm happy to email that information out as well.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions? James, thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
I'd like to say we're looking forward to the next one, but I'd be lying.
It is a pain, but it's worth it for the
Yeah, I think,
Long run.
judging from some of the business owners that I've heard, input from, the signs are important, and revising this is going to be a good step forward for us.
Yeah, I think as we move forward, making this a little easier for people will go a long way. A sign is a really big investment. A 32 square foot sign, which is kind of the maximum sign size we allow for freestanding signs, can cost upwards of $6,000. We want to get it right the first time for these business owners so that they aren't outlaying more money than they need to, and we want to make sure that it's a little bit friendlier as we go forward. So,
Thank you, James.
thank you.
Okay, moving forward to item 9, public comments. The public, as usual, speaks loudly.
Yeah.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
I second
Seconded.
All in favor?
that. Aye.
Aye.
We're done. Thank you.